God is never directly mentioned, but we can also maybe imagine that God is hidden in the book of Esther. So this quote in Hebrew is from the book of Esther itself, okay, in chapter 5, verse 4. Now, we can read what it says is this is when Esther's going to the king. So Esther goes to the king and there's a rule that is potentially punishable by death, that if you approach the king or go to the king uninvited, you could have a punishment and there could be capital punishment. So she takes a huge risk because she's the only one who, has close enough access and is going to go try and stop the decree for the Jews to be killed. So she goes and says, "If you please, your master," Esther said, "let your majesty and Haman come today to a feast that I've prepared for him." So she's inviting Haman and the king to a feast where she'll wine and dine them, and then eventually tell him about the decree and get it undone. If we look at that line in Hebrew, the commentators notice that God is hidden in this line. So God in Hebrew, the proper name of God is Yud He Vav He. So the rabbis notice that Yud He Vav He are next to each other in this line of the Torah. So they say God may not be mentioned, but God is hidden in the words. Now this is this may seem like a stretch, and that's fine if we think it's a stretch. This is not the only place. Like, this is what they do. They count letters, they look at letters next to each other. So this is one of the things they do to interpret Torah. And so they're seeing God hidden in this verse and this is the verse one of the verses where Esther's taking her biggest risk to save the Jews. So that's where God is hidden. So the question might be, why? Why would God be hidden? Why not just say God was with Esther, right? And I want to propose two reasons to start. Now, this is a very poor copy of a text, and I will tell you why it's a poor copy. That it's from this. I don't have it digital. I could have retyped the whole thing, but it's from this sort of, what did we used to call these? Like, I don't know what you call these, like these kind of books from rabbinical school. And
mimeographed.
Yeah, something, right? And many years ago, I had a bookshelf in the same room where the laundry room is, and the washing machine, I guess, exploded. I don't know what you call it. It suddenly was raining in the whole room. So this poor copy is a result of that. But I'm going to read it to you anyways because I didn't feel like retyping the whole thing. So I think you can kind of see it. So this is written by a more modern commentator, answering the question of why is God hidden. So the Nes Nistar, or meaning which means in English the hidden miracle, Nes from Hanukkah, Nes Gadol Hayasham, the hidden miracle of Purim is cloaked within the natural chain of events. It seems fitting that the Hebrew month in which Purim falls, Adar, which we're in right now, is related to the word aderet, or cloak. The entire sequence of events begins with the dethroning of Vashti, the choosing of Esther, the plot to kill King Ahasuerus, Haman's decree, Ahasuerus' bout of insomnia, and the belated yet timely reading of his Book of Chronicles, in which Mordecai's loyal effort to save the king was finally remembered. All appears as sequence of seemingly unrelated events that occur over a period of 9 years. The miracle of Purim is not that anything exceptional or transcendent happened, but all these events, when strung together like beads in a chain, form a sublime serendipity. On Purim, we attempt to read secular history as sacred writ, as the slow yet meaningful unfolding of the will of God. Even the seeming eclipse of God's divine providence has its place within the story of the Megillah. The Nesni star, or the hidden miracle, reveals that nothing happens by chance alone. Oh, even Haman's lottery, the drawing of Purim, of lots, becomes a part of the divine plan, as well as the name of the holiday. That which seems to be arbitrary or even unlucky becomes meaningful in the Megillah's reading of the history. So what, well, I'll let you make comments on that before I say more about that. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, maybe. Oh. So I'm going to say more about the hidden nature of God, but I'd love to hear what you think of that reading, and or what you think of that text where God is hidden in the Megillah. Any thoughts on that? Yes, well, Marilyn.
What I was thinking is not so much what you read, but the idea that Esther on her own, I mean, took the risk as an individual, and maybe she had prayed about it, or maybe God gave her the courage, I don't know, but that could be why he was hidden a little bit, to let her shine, because she's the one that took the risk and did it on her own. Nobody spoke to her, as far as we know. You know, so she initiated it. She kind of decided to do it. So I don't know if that has anything connected.
Right, like in some ways it uplifts her as the hero instead of God, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it centers her, right. The reason I love the thing I read, I'll just tell you, is sometimes when people say like, where do you find God? I don't, you know, there's no miracles today, all those things. I've often thought of God as like in the coincidences, when there's such an intense coincidence that you're like, this can't just be, you know, maybe even Marilyn's coincidence of her shot, but you know, those coincidences in life that seem like they're it's too much for them to just be random. And I feel like that's in some ways what that quote I read was saying, is like the miracle of the Purim story is sort of hidden, and the sort of the holiness in it is, once we look at the whole picture, once we look back, there's a connection between things, and there's everything, you know, plays out in a certain way. And I'm sure we've had that experience where we've been like, oh wow, I did that thing, or that thing happened and it led to this, and it all connects in a way that's that kind of makes us believe in something bigger, or maybe some of us, some of the time.
I think I ask this question every year, but I forget who wrote the Megillah, or who wrote the story of Purim.
Well, who wrote the book of Esther? I mean,
right.
I don't know. So it's in the Bible, it's in the Hebrew, it's in the Tanakh. I don't know that we know the author. There's probably, you know, biblical scholars pose these things, but
I guess yeah. I enjoy what you pointed out. I love that you highlighted the Yud He Vav, the name of God. I love that. And I think whoever wrote it, if it was a few people, or, you know, together, I just like to think of the person who wrote it, or the people who wrote it, doing these things, making these secret signs, and I like that. I would like to know more, but it's hard to know.
It's hard to know, and what the rabbis would say is like, that was the hand of God in the text. But yes, it's almost like a secret code. Weren't there those, you know, I feel like there were books when I was a kid where there were like codes with, you know, in it, like a Morse code. Yeah. And there's a lot of that commentators describe.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to Marilyn's thought, because it's interesting, because it relates to the next sort of idea that I wanted to bring about why God is hidden. And that's about the year cycle of where Purim and the Megillah is read. So what's interesting about what you say, Marilyn, is sort of the opposite is what happens in many places, where we decenter the people and lift up God, right? So if we think of Pesach and Passover and Moses, it's really in the Haggadah in the traditional Haggadah, there's a lot of talk about God and downplaying of Moses so that people will believe in God as the miracle maker and not Moses and not worship Moses. So that's like a clear kind of tradition or thing. There's a better word than thing, but so Rabbi Michael Straussfeld argues that if we see the year cycle, so we have a lot of New Years in the Jewish calendar. We just had Tu B'Shvat, New Year's of the Trees. We have Rosh Hashanah, but there's also Nisan, which is the month in which Passover happens, which is actually the first month of the new year. So Rosh Hashanah is in the 7th month of the Jewish year. So the first month is the month of Pesach, which is Nisan. Okay, so if we think of the calendar as starting with the month of Nisan, it's a whole nother thing about why there's 4 New Years and all that. But then, and that's the time of rebirth, that's the spring, that's the beginning, if we think of that as the beginning of our journey as a Jewish people, right? We're leaving Egypt, we're becoming a Jewish people. Then if that's what we see as the beginning, then Purim is the end of that cycle, which I like especially this year, because we're ending the cycle of our year in COVID and holidays. And then we can see God in a powerful way. So in the story of Passover, God is the one who redeems us. And it's a very strong tradition that it's God and not Moses. And God's the central actor. It's not an angel. It's not a human. It's not an army. It's God who does the miracles, God who parts the Red Sea. By contrast, as Marilyn said, Purim, it's people who save us, and people who are at the center, and God's not mentioned at all. So when God's understood as hidden behind the story, and the saving of the Jewish people in the Purim story is the work of Jewish people, and Passover is teaching us that redemption is possible, but by the time we go through the whole cycle, we get to Purim nearly a year later, we've learned how to bring about our own redemption. So it's sort of like we start by seeing that redemption is possible when we escape Egypt. And once we've gone through a whole year of the holiday cycle, we've sort of grown and matured and learned that we can enact our own redemption. And so that's why God is hidden, in order to make us have that power, which maybe we weren't ready to have at Passover. And I just love that image of sort of the maturing of the Jewish spirit and the Jewish people through that holiday cycle. And so that's another idea of why, which is a little bit what Marilyn said, is like, so the people feel that they have the power, which is quite the opposite of how it is in the Pesach story. So that was just a lot of talking, but any thoughts on that and the year cycle seen in that way?
But the story doesn't just end with the redemption. I mean, it ends with the hanging of all those enemies.
That's true. That's true. And, it's not as pretty, right?
No, and that's a people thing too. I mean, that
right.
Is the hidden hand of God behind that, or not? You know, I mean, I would prefer if it were not.
So I just want to say, in case people don't know, is that the end of the book of Esther, which is really troubling and problematic, and we often leave out when we talk about it, so thank you, is of the Jews killing many, many, many people, like thousands of people. It's a massacre. And actually was used, the book of Purim was used by Baruch Goldstein in 97, 96, something like that, I don't remember, to kill praying people in the West Bank in Israel, a rabbi, and it was on, I think, Erev Purim, or on Purim day, and that text was used as sort of justification for that murder. So that's an interesting question of if God is hidden in the story of Esther saving us, is God hidden in the story of the Jews killing massacring others. And I guess Baruch Goldstein would claim so, but maybe then we think God isn't part of either, and that by the time we get to Purim, God has sort of let us be on our own, and we do the good things and the bad things, and it's free will. I don't know. It's a good question. But if you've never read the last chapter of the book of Esther, don't read it before you go to bed.
Isn't it traditionally read quickly? I think, isn't it the way it's done in Orthodox shuls?
Yeah.
That you charge through that so quickly that you can barely, grasp what it's all about.
In rabbinical school, there were people who would stand on their heads and read it, like as a way to sort of like undo it. Yes. So it is read. I just think in liberal communities, people don't really talk about it. You know, it's like all about the beauty pageant. And there's so much people don't talk about in Esther, in the book of Esther. I mean, the whole beauty pageant that we all dress up and look like Esther and have a beauty pageant. No, it wasn't just a beauty pageant. You know, the king was having his way with the women and deciding who he wanted. So it wasn't, you know, a nice, pretty beauty pageant the way we like to think about it.
No, funny, I remember learning that the king raised his scepter when Esther came. And as I got older, I said, there's symbolism hidden all over the place.
That's right. And yeah, I mean, that whole thing of the beauty pageant is a little bit, the whole holiday is a little troubling, but yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that, Pam, but yeah.
Leave it to a 10-year-old mind.
That's right. So I want to share more. Oh, hi, Roseanne. I didn't see you pop in. I wanted to share. Hi. So now, let's see. It's so hard, all these screens. I wanted to look at, so that's about God's hiddenness in the text or absence. You know, maybe it's God's absence and not God's hiddenness, depending on how we see it. But I want to talk now about how Esther is hidden and revealed, because that's another important piece of the text. One day you'll just
if I can ask
Yeah.
one thing, you know, I'm wondering if we don't see God in the courage that she had and others had, because you know, it's just coincidence, I guess, that in this whole year where justice is, you know, being emphasized in many different aspects of our lives, I often think to myself, like the people who first walked the bridges and you know, put their lives on the line with police and dogs and all that. Where did they get the courage?
Right.
You know, and then you say, oh, well, they're religious people, so their faith maybe brought them that courage, their gods or whatever. So I'm wondering if, again, hidden in the background, that was that. And I didn't know if other people had kind of seen that same thing. And, you know, people who march even go down to our Capitol, you know, 8 years ago, whatever, you know.
Yeah. And then if that's true, where's God in the killing at the end of the book?
Yeah. Yes, I just threw that out because I was wondering if other people had
No, I like it. I was
other questions about that, because, you know, every time I see there's a march at our Capitol or something like that, you know, or Black Lives Matter or whatever, you know, you just, you know, like down in Janesville, or you just don't know who's going to come out of the cracks and be, you know, be a jerk, be stupid.
Yeah.
And those people are very brave to, you know, they put up, not shut up, you know, so to speak, however that phrase goes.
You know, Esther did what she did because Mordecai really wanted her to.
Yeah.
And we
I
play.
understand, but she still had to walk the walk. Yeah.
Right. So, so we had a wonderful music teacher in our temple, and she wrote a whole musical about the Purim story. And when Mordecai is trying to convince Esther to go and be brave and do this for your people, she sings, "Who needs a throne? They make me groan. Leave me alone, uncle."
Oh,
You know that tune from another Broadway show? So, I mean, he convinced her, twisted her arm, or maybe he convinced her she's safe. We'll never know, will we?
Right. But she's still,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go, Marcy.
Wasn't she afraid for her life that if she didn't go to the king and the Jews got saved, then she wouldn't be saved because she would be in the castle with the king? Am I wrong about that?
Well, the way so it says, I was gonna maybe bring this up. So in chapter 4 of Esther, that's interesting. Well, I'll read chapter 4 where it is. So when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, so when she said she didn't want, that like it was too dangerous for her to go to the king. So Mordecai says, you have to go to the king, look at this decree. And Esther says, I can't go to the king. Like, you know that's punishable by death. Then Mordecai says, do not think that because of you, because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. That's interesting. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, maybe I always think of it as that she thinks she's safe in the king's house, and that if she doesn't stand up for the Jews, she's not going to stay safe. But this is actually what you're saying, Marcy, is that that if the Jews get help from another place, she'll be killed if she doesn't come out as a Jew.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in the context of how people are motivated to be brave. And there's so many brave people, you know, in history and right now. And I was thinking, like, in this story, is she brave because she's afraid for her own life? I wasn't sure.
I think of her, though, this is what I thought, but it's a good, because that's complicating it for me. Because what I always think of her as like the court Jew, right? Like, we know there were a lot of Jews in the last administration who maybe didn't speak up in ways maybe some of us thought when there was anti-Semitism and other problems. And that, like, are you safe in the court? Like, is being close to power going to keep you safe? And what Mordecai, I always read that line, like, if you remain silent at this time, like, you can't remain silent, even though, like, you're in this safe, what feels like a safe place. And that, and the line, who knows, but you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. Like, don't think of it as like hiding in the castle, but like, maybe you're there, this is why you're there. But that's less cynical than Marcy's ruining my image of Esther. That's okay.
I do not mean to do that. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But
Yeah,
as you're saying that, I'm thinking of those Jews who served actually in the German government during World War II and thought
that's right.
they were safe
That's right.
because they were German.
Right.
But that didn't save them at all. They perished with all the other Jews.
That's what I think of as Esther. I think of Esther as like, when I won't name names in the past administration, I would think they're the German Jews. They're the ones who think that if you're close to power, you're gonna escape the hate. And I don't think it works that way. And that you can
Many of them have been thrown under the bus since.
Right.
It's not safe.
Yeah. And I think also that it's also an act of civil disobedience, what she's doing, because she's breaking a law non-violently, but still risking her life. So it's also an interesting sort of like image of change in the world, is it's non-violent, but but she's breaking a law. So yeah, but maybe just for her own good. But maybe we all do things. Maybe it's all, maybe.
But it doesn't have to be either or,
Yeah.
you know.
That's true. Because in that moment, she was much safer to say nothing, right? So, and who knows if Mordecai was right? He's just saying like, you're going to get killed too. Like, so, yeah.
But can I just ask, as far as what Purim means, I saw in parentheses lots. Is that right?
Yeah. So Pur is a lot, and Purim is the plural of that, of lots. And so so they picked a lot for the date of the hanging. So that's what it means. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Were you going to say something about that, Pam?
No,
No, you were just
I was just saying.
you were
I
doing
was-
hand motions with me.
Visuals. They
Yeah.
drew a lot. A lot,
Right.
but only one a lot.
Thank you.
So now I want to look at a little bit more about Esther. Okay, so this part is fun too. This is more, wait, I don't remember who said about, who wrote the, Estelle, who wrote it, and were they, giving us coded messages. Here's our next coded message in the text. So the name Esther appears nowhere else in the Bible except for the book of Esther. So, and it's not it's a foreign name. It's not an Israelite name. And so the question is, why is she named Esther? The rabbis like to ask things like if it doesn't appear anywhere else in the Bible. So, so in Deuteronomy, when God talks about that God is going to hide God's face, so I will keep my countenance or my face hidden from the people because they've turned to other gods. Okay, so basically the context of that, I mean, it doesn't matter, like that is just like God's going to be hidden from the people. The word for hidden that's highlighted here in Hebrew is astir, which has the same, sounds almost the same as Esther, just different vowels, same letters. And so the very name of, because we can see it up here, here's Esther in the book of Esther, and here's astir. So same letters. So the very name of Esther is found when the rabbis say, well, where does this name appear? This is the place they pull, and so her very name is that of being hidden. And so that, oh yeah, okay. And then I wanted to, and then what the rabbis say, sort of say this explicitly right here. I don't want this. One day I'm just going to be able to pass you out papers and not have to deal with all these screens at the same time. It'll be so lovely, won't it? We'll drink tea and study Torah together like normal people. Okay, I don't know how to get rid of that right now. So can somebody read this quote right here from the Talmud? Why then was she called Esther?
Why then was she called Esther? Because she concealed, masteret, the truth about herself, as it is stated. Esther had not yet made known her kindred, nor her people.
So the rabbis say, why is she named Esther? She's named Esther because so why they're talking about her name is not just that it doesn't appear anywhere else, but it says her name was Hadassah, or otherwise known as Esther. So they're like, wait, what? Why is she Hadassah and Esther? Why these two names? And they're saying, well, the Esther part is because she kept her identity hidden. And so she's actually in her in her actual identity and name, is called the hidden, is a hider. So, and she becomes a symbol actually for Marranos. And Marranos were the Jews in Spain, the Spanish Jews who hid their identity in the Inquisition. And there's a really nice poem that's right here that also is from the bad copy, but about how the Marranos connected to the identity of Esther. So we can take turns reading it, but Estelle, I see you on my screen. Do you want to start? Small? Is it too hard to read?
I think let's see. Confess your offenses to the cross without concealing anything relating to yourself or any other person, but without, it's hard to say, let's see, without offering false testimony against anyone. The Holy Office shows mercy to all who confess freely. Otherwise, justice will be executed.
So that is a quote from the Inquisitor, or supposedly. Okay. Who wants to? Oh my gosh! Look at me and my screen. Okay, I think maybe I'll just read it, and not try and. Okay. Every day for 600 years, people hid their faith, and the seasons passed. Saintly Esther, my soul stays hidden. I'm going to actually read it from my book because I can't deal with that screen.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Maybe not. Okay, wait. No, actually, I'm going to do something. I'm just going to make it small. And the seasons pass, saintly Esther. My soul stays hidden, speaking softly, words praising Adonai, time forgetting time, eyes forgetting light. We hide in order to survive, living in brief moments, whispering the truth to the shadows. I am a woman and a Jew, saintly Esther. How do you endure those long months of living what you were not and embracing what you loved not? As I enter this house of wood and stone, give me your poor handmaiden strength enough to pass through this night of fear. Into the house I go, O God, forced by the sword into this house. The soul moans, the God can see I do not believe in the images of wood and stone. I'm assuming that is the church. Years pass, winter to spring, brown hills to wading green, but we live in an endless winter, covering our lives with stillborn spring, hoping for the restoration of our souls. Esther, our queen, is the passing of generations and have inherited your suffering. We have come to possess your woe, and for the house of a strange king, you hide your race and birth. Like you, Queen Esther, we fast for 3 days and nights to remember our private lives, to purify our souls. Esther, the woman of this household, pray with your words. And Esther prayed to the Lord God of Israel, saying, the Lord Adonai, help me, for I am alone. Give me courage, master of all powers. Put clever words into my mouth, and I face the lion. You know, Lord, I hate the symbol of my high position. The crown I wear upon my head in the court I loathe. And do not swear it when I am alone. I have found no pleasure in this house. God, whose strength prevails over all, listen to the voice of the victim. Save us from the hand of the wicked, and free me from my fear. Seasons pass, saintly Esther, and yet this time of dark burning fires has given me a place to praise the name of the Lord Adonai. Though I hide my true self from the outside world, my people learn the passion of my faith, for I am needed to remember the past. I lead my people Israel in prayers my mother taught me as we lit Sabbath candles in the cellar. Blessed be the name of Lord Adonai forever. Amen. Who brings the light of the morning to the afternoon, and from the afternoon comes to the evening, and from the evening to the dawn, and from the dawn brings light to the morning. Every day for 600 years, people hid their faith from the Inquisition, but in the tradition of Esther. So, let's see, I'm just, sorry. So, I wanted to share that to sort of show a sort of connection over time of this idea of hiding Jewish identity. And just wanted to have a conversation about times we hide and what it's like, and if it's, you know, scary or powerful. Or does anyone have any thoughts either about the poem or about hiding?
There have been times when I have been around people who I thought were anti-Semitic or unthinking, and I did not let it be known that I was Jewish. So I was kind of hiding.
Yeah, and the hiding in this story, and maybe when we do it, is both very powerful. Like, I think about our African American, you know, brothers and sisters don't get to hide, right? It's just like right there.
Yep.
So there's something powerful we have, that we can be Queen Esther and we can hide, or we, you know, can pretend we're German and not Jewish. But there's also something really, really scary about it, because if they don't know who I am, then what are they going to do when they find out? And the hiding and revealing, and when you reveal and when you don't, and also like kind of the question of what's real and what's not real, like, you know, or what's true and what's not. Nothing's quite as it seems, and that can be unsettling. So both powerful and unsettling when we hide our identities, and then the question of how to reveal them. So
I don't know if hiding is the right word, or just not saying I am Jewish. You know,
right,
you hear
passing,
things going on,
right,
passing, just like,
passing.
you know, you said about the German Jews and the Jews
Right.
in the Trump administration and whatever, where, you know, don't ask, don't tell.
That's right. That's right. So more passing than hiding, right?
When
I mean, obviously the Inquisitors, the Marranos were hiding, but a lot of times we just pass. Yeah, go ahead, Patty.
Well, I was just
I was going to say there. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's do Patty, then Pam.
Okay, I was thinking of another word that we can use instead of the word hiding, and that's concealment.
Mm.
And it has a bit of a different concept, but I think all of us conceal some part of us from other people, whether it's our Jewishness or our political views, our marital status, even personal things like loneliness. And all of those can have a detrimental effect on who we are and how we, and our relationships with other people.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that's true. That my daughter did this great activity in Hebrew school, I think last year, probably feels like 10 years ago, but where they made masks and they wrote on the inside what, like, truths that people don't know, and then on the outside they put sort of the stuff, and it was so great. I was like, we should all do that, you know. But that exactly what you're saying. So not necessarily like an identity thing, but that I don't know, scared of the dark or whatever.
Well, and in this COVID, so many people are alone, are sequestering. They're in their homes, their apartments, their assisted living, whatever. I have friends who say, I'm okay, I'm all right, don't worry, I'm gonna be fine. And yet I know how lonely they are, and depressed, I'm sure, at being alone. And that's when we have to really reach out and go beyond that, whatever they're concealing or not willing to, and maybe just dropping off flowers, you know, without acknowledging, oh, I know you're feeling so bad, and the drama that's involved.
Right. Thank you. No, that's what I can. What were you going to say, Pam?
I was just remembering, I had a dear friend in high school who was Polish, and she wanted me to be her maid of honor. And I did become her maid of honor. But at the reception, her relatives, who had had too much to drink, began talking in an anti-Semitic way, very, very loud and vulgarly. And I said, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. And I couldn't, in other words, it's sometimes when you can't hide your Judaism because your emotion comes, and I was so frightened, just panicked, even though part of me knew that I looked like a bridesmaid.
That's right. Right. You had the right costume on, right?
I couldn't stay. And I actually ran away.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's intense. Thank you.
It was very intense and very good for me to feel that.
Yeah.
And walk away with that kind of knowledge. It was a physical knowledge as well as an emotional one.
That reminds me of a little different here, but my husband probably was braver than I was when he was living, and maybe still. And we had a guy come here to cut wood or bring some wood for us. Yeah. And at the end, he told us a price, and my husband went to pay him, and he said, "Oh, good, you're not trying to Jew me down." And Jim immediately called him on that and told him he wasn't going to put up with that kind of language. And the guy looked totally taken aback, because I'm sure no one had ever called him on that. We live out in the country. There aren't too many Jews where I live, but the guy was huge. He's really big, and Jim wasn't that big, but I thought it was really courageous of him to speak up and say that to him.
Right.
So
And when is it courageous and when is it
Stupid.
maybe foolish?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes we don't find out till afterwards.
That's right.
Exactly.
I'm curious in the 15th century about the Marranos, and like in terms of being courageous or leaving, how did people decide that? Like that, you know, I have family that is Sephardic and left Spain and migrated up to Rotterdam. And I'm just curious, like those who stayed and pretended to be Christian, and those who left and went to Sicily and Italy and all over Europe. I don't know, is there much written about that? Like,
I don't know.
what was courageous and what was, or whether it was more, you know, courageous to stay or more courageous to go. So the Marranos stayed and practiced, but undercover.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting what's courageous, right? Because like when I think about the refugees resettle, I think that we resettle are so courageous to like make that journey. But
Exactly.
you could say like they left. I mean, you know, I guess I never thought of it that way, that leaving
Yeah.
is
Equally, yeah.
that
Equally
staying is,
courageous.
yeah. I mean, so but I think sometimes people also don't really have the ability to leave. You know, maybe your family had that. I think about that a lot. Yeah.
What about the first queen? Didn't she refuse?
Yes. So Vashti, we should all
exhibit her, you know, her body and her sexuality for the pleasure of the court men, and thereby was, you know, removed.
Banished.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, there's that hiddenness too. I mean, she refused to reveal herself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, she refused. I didn't think of that. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Yeah, and is that hiddenness or is that?
It's not hidden. I mean, I think she was he had a sense of integrity.
Right, right. More like,
Yeah, more like
yeah, standing up for, yeah.
So that was Vashti.
That was Vashti.
So do those names, I mean, does Vashti mean something?
I'm sure it means something. I don't know. I think they're all names that are not, that are foreign names.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Does anyone know what Vashti means?
I don't, but I thought there might be a connection between Esther and Ishtar.
Yes, there's writings about that. There's writings about the god, right? There's writings about that. But Vashti, I don't know. But I did, just because we're about to run out of time, but I wanted to say something about celebrating Vashti. That I was when I lived in Philadelphia, we had these, you know, we have groggers to blot out the name of Haman. We had these like flags with bells. So when you said Vashti, she got cheered on as a sort of powerful, brave. So I feel like we should like have a tradition of cheering on Vashti. Because I don't know what other people, I grew up thinking Vashti was like the rejected, the evil queen, you know, and so sort of reclaiming Vashti has been part of the Jewish feminist agenda.
Right, great.
Yeah, I just want to end with one thing about the hidden God in the story, is that what I like about, despite Steve challenging us, which is super helpful, is this sort of idea of God hidden in between the words and in between the actions, rather than the God of Pesach. Is that feels more like the God in this story, feels more like a God that we can know in our lives. Like we're not at Sinai having like, you know, fire and brimstone, but the God of the in-between and the coincidences and that's in that courage, I think is more of a God that maybe a lot of us can relate to. But I see some Vashti Googling. Yes, Eve.
I'm looking on my phone at
Yeah.
Google. Vashti is a Farsi and Persian name, meaning beautiful or best.
Uh-huh. So it is foreign, yeah. Or foreign to, yeah. But not foreign to the story of Purim took place in Persia, but it's not a Hebrew name, yeah.
So it also means excellent woman, best of women.
Right.
So whoever wrote the story, Estelle, was giving us a message about Vashti, even though a lot of us grew up thinking she was the evil queen, right?
Right.
Am I the only one who thought she was the bad queen growing up?
No, I thought so.
Yeah, we all thought. No one wanted to dress up as Vashti. Everyone asked me. Right. Well, thank you. This was so fun, and maybe I'll take my Grinch hat off and enjoy Purim. So thank you.
I have a question, though.
Yeah.
It's related, but not directly. Discussion on Monday when Roz and I were doing a Hamantash and Bake was mentioned that the Jews at the time were keeping kosher, and that's why Esther in the king's home was eating vegetarian. Is that really timeline correct?
I never heard that she was a vegetarian, but I like that idea. But I've never heard
that was the excuse for why we have so much poppy seed and lentils in the story.
You know, I had never heard that either, Eve, and I was just
I
very
thought
curious.
we're making stuff up to suit what we want to believe is what it felt like.
I've always wondered what the thing with the poppy seeds are. I'm like, why are we eating? Why poppy seeds?
Because I love them.
Okay, but like,
so why not?
Yeah.
There were some other things that
raspberry, I have to say. I'm sorry.
Well, but some of the things that were being told, I mean, this was definitely the Chabad group. It was like, nah, I've never heard that before. I'm not buying that one.
What about the idea that the dreidel was a form of keeping the language alive? It was a secretive way of studying the Hebrew letters.
I've
yeah,
heard
but they're
that.
only 4 letters, so who believes that?
Did anyone hear that one?
Yes, I've heard
Yeah.
that.
Subterfuge, they were actually playing a gambling game, right?
And Eve, I heard that some children's book authors must have heard the same thing as you did, because I looked at some children's stuff and they said that Esther was a vegetarian.
Could be.
Wow.
So the poppy seeds, so I don't know if there's anything about opium, but poppy seeds and
Yeah,
there
Maybe
might
that's
be.
where she got her courage.
that's what
Could
I
be.
thought about.
I like that.
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Very
Bye,
nice.
Ann.
Thank you so much, Rabbi
Happy
Renee.
Thank you,
Sure.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Marilyn, thank you for that hint about the vaccine. I will look into that.
And tell
Okay,
your
good.
father we'd like to have him join us more often.
Oh, yeah, I know. I don't know what happened to him. It looked like he was
That
driving.
was fun. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rabbi Renee.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
See you
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Jimmy? Oh, he's gone. I'll send him a message. Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye.
Okay.
Good to, you look, I love the scarf.
The Spears had me in charge of Debbie's dad when they went off on a trip to, I don't know if it's Scottish or Ireland. I think it's Scotch. It's Scotch wool. That was my
Oh,
thank
nice.
you.
It
So
makes
when
you
I
look
wear it,
better
I
if
think,
you're dressed up.
well, it's warm and cuddly and it makes me think of Jack and Debbie and her father.
Hmm.
Well, that's all good.
It is.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yep.
Talk to you
Say
soon, Eve.
hi.
Yep. Renee, I couldn't do a screenshot. I'm not sure if it's not enabled.
I know, I didn't,
Yeah,
when she was,
I was reading that you can hover above the chat and then it'll give you the option to take a screenshot, but I'm hovering above the chat and I'm clicking on everything